All right, welcome to Distilled Security Podcast, episode 10. My name's Justin Leapline. I'm here with Rick and Joe, and thank you for joining us. Today we got a very interesting lineup. One of the topics that I'm actually really eager to talk about here is what do you do when you're facing cuts, within an organization? Obviously in the news, we're hearing a lot about DOGE, several cuts within the federal government going on, but it's not just the federal government, it's organizations are cutting back. They're seeing spending cutting back. I know quite a few organizations that have let go resources or tightened up budgets and everything. And, from us as security professionals, leaders, within the industry, how do you make sure that doesn't impact your organization? Obviously, you're trying to tote the line. You're not responsible for revenue, with that and try to go along with it. But are there certain steps that we can do to help the organization make sure they don't falter from, the cuts that they're making and everything?
Yeah. You want to take first crack?
Well, first, I would say that it's definitely going to affect the organization. It's going to create risk. And so it's all about, we talk about this every episode, risk management. And so I was thinking about how all the reliance on, even if your company isn't affected by the cuts, if your company's not getting cut, but with the federal government cutting resources, which resources or programs in the government does your company rely on for security? I was actually talking to some DHS CISA people, and they have a lot of programs that companies take advantage of. And if there's an impact for those resources and those programs aren't as available, that's another factor as well, which I don't think we were originally talking about, but I was just thinking about.
Well, that's a good thing. I wonder how, those resources are nice that you can kind of rely on, but is it a reliance, type of thing? It's definitely an optimization. If they have templates or guidance documents that they're producing, they're going to be better than what they had, prior, or, took time to produce themselves, into that case.
I definitely know some organizations that rely on those and similar resources for some important control attestations associated with threat monitoring and things like that, I think.
Gotcha.
So I think there's some instances where, I don't know if they're like major key controls, but certainly places where you used to be able to evidence clearly and now you might need to figure something else out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, so back to the question is, how are companies, so let's say you are responsible for security at your company, and let's take the perspective, your company is letting some people go, but you're still there. How do you manage that risk? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so one of the things I'd like to do, in with this of kind of tightening the belt and everything, with any program, security optimizations can happen, into that. You get a little bloated, implemented too many tools along the way, is not fully optimized, into that. There's a lot of internal projects that, can go resource only that you can get a lot of strides in to do.
Or even tools get better.
Yeah, exactly. So, do you have all the tooling, built into your single sign-on, that would take, advantage of your, Microsoft, 365 Active Directory? Okay, let's bring them on board and get everybody on the same thing. Do we have a good lick of our perimeter, our vulnerability management, our patch management? We've been lax, in a little bit. Let's refocus on that. Let's get rid of all those, unpatched systems that are just, out of service or something like that. Those are like good projects to kind of bring up that we've been kicking down that, takes more resources and not really capital budget, that would come out of that.
Sounds like a conversation we had in episode 9 where we talked about budgets and optimizing and automation.
Yeah.
So let's, what I'm hearing is, can we automate some things and make up for, so we don't have an increased set of risks because we're not compromising the processes we're doing. How do we get more done with the same people that are left?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Another thing, I getting back to core principles, into that, really looking at what must the lights stay on, so if you have cash cow government contracts or compliance initiatives that just can't falter because of the impact of your customer, relationships, those are ones that you need to just watch very carefully. So if there's resources being cut that, just strain too much, that's going to be a problem. That's where you have to like put added controls and added oversight. Obviously, from a GRC governance perspective, that's one of our primary roles, is to be that added eyes, over the process. But when you're losing people left and right, sometimes those, especially manual controls, fall through the cracks. So you need to build in process to make sure that when you're doing, let's say, whole nother conversation on SOC 2 or something like that, but if somebody's doing some access reviews and we let them go and nobody picks that up, all of a sudden we're going to have a number of deficiencies coming out of our next assessment.
It's a really good tie. So I had three things with this topic, and it's such a good tie into the first one, which is like, I take it back to inventories, right? So OIT actually counsels organizations through this as we like.
What's OIT?
So I have a company, not a plug, but kind
of
a plug.
You can plug it. Yeah, it's a plug.
So OIT is Optimize It. It's a company I have that helps organizations do outsourcing stuff. So whether it's displacing an existing provider or helping a company transform how its labor works and potentially displacing active employees, right?
Okay.
So we help leaders think through some of these things, and one of the things, and it really ties into your the what's important question, is to me, with my security background, I think that it's an inventory problem, right? It's an inventory of activities at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And so many organizations, it sounds so simple, just like an inventory of servers or inventory of network devices, but we all know that it's like deceptively simple and it's hard to actually get right. And activities are particularly hard because if you think about it in terms of like, you might have two types of leaders, right? Really, really good leaders. Well, how do they operate? Well, they typically delegate activities or empower employees so they can do a bunch of stuff without being babysat. Well, when employees are doing a bunch of stuff without being babysat, there's the potential for a leader not necessarily to know some of the tactical things that are going on there, right? The opposite's also true. If you have a particularly bad leader, maybe they babysit a lot, but they're kind of a bad leader. They might not have everything figured out. They might not know everything that's going on just because they don't know. So inventories of like what employees are doing essentially are deceptively hard to get right. And honestly, the only magic for this that I know is like that sort of management by walking around thing, where you just need to talk to people, have those relationships and understand like, hey, what are people working on? And so if you're thinking your company's starting to get close to a riff or something like that, one of the things that we definitely advise is like, hey, have those conversations, exercise those relationships, make sure you're talking to people about what's going on, what's not so great. Like the communication part is key, because if you don't have that inventory, ultimately what's going to happen, and this gets to what you were saying in terms of the risk of controls failing and stuff like that, right? People are going to be working on something. They don't necessarily need leadership's help to do it, but then it gets lost, right? And people get missed in a riff and they go, oh crap, this critical contract that relies on these controls, well, we stopped doing XYZ 2 months ago when Tony left or whatever it is.
I had somebody, I'm not going to name which company I worked for at the time, but I was on vacation and we had cutbacks.
Yeah.
And somebody on my team got cut without even talking to me. And I had some words at the time.
Sure.
But I went up to the CEO and I was like, hey, they're doing some critical processes. Now we can't do this stuff, type of thing. And they're like, well, I didn't know they were doing that. I was like, and of course I was like, well, I gave you a report every 2 weeks of everything we're doing from a security team.
Yeah.
Type of thing. Like, I don't know how it could be more clear, but now we're at risk. And then we went and hired another person.
Yeah. Well, and there's a secondary trap here too, which is to say if executive leadership in an organization has already made the decision we have to make cuts, there's a natural inclination to be like, well, okay, but why would we spend more time and effort talking to these individuals? Like, it's not going to change our decision. We have to do this financially, or we have to do this strategically, or whatever. It's like, well, no. You're not talking to them to try and change the decision. You're talking to them because you need to understand what the fallout's going to be. Regardless of the decision's the same. Like, it's a risk management thing.
Yeah. So it sounds like you guys, and I like when you plug the company because it shows some credibility here with your expertise, and that's helpful. I've been through this.
Yeah.
I was at a company that for years before I got recruited away, we were going through, and IT had let a lot of people go. Mm-hmm. And that happened over time. one of the things that I found is because of some stuff I put together, the security team was one of the last to be impacted because I did some of the things you guys are talking about, and I can share that. Your inventory is much like what ITIL calls a part of the process inventory for a CMDB, and I called it a security management framework, which I might have mentioned this before.
Yeah, I think
previous
the last episode. Yeah,
and the security management framework was simply, what are your main functions? What are the processes that carry those out? How critical are they?
Yeah.
What's the priority of it? How frequently does it happen? Is it on demand or is it event driven?
Yep.
Or is it on a schedule? When it happens, then what you're talking about is how many hours does somebody take? And you take all of that and you figure out your bandwidth needs, and then you tie those processes back to like I just talked about this earlier today with somebody. Every risk, cyber risk, doesn't matter, is a business risk.
Yeah.
So how does it impact the business?
Yep.
So if I have advice for security leaders, it's please figure out how to write your cyber risks into terms of business risk.
Yep.
And focus on that. And then, just thinking through the whole process of, it becomes risk management. And so, had you had any inkling there was going to be that people were going to be doing this while you were away, you might have been able to purposely share these are the impacts. This is the processes that can't be done. And by the way, my job isn't to accept this risk. That's your job as a C-level executive to accept this risk, but I'm going to tell you what this risk is.
Right.
Exactly, yeah.
And that's at the end of the day, I mean, that's our role and responsibility is to express it. Like I mentored, younger security leadership. And one of the things I say very commonly is, your role is to educate the risks and the consequences thereof to the best of your knowledge. If you've done that and feel you've done that well, I don't care. I had this one saying with a founder, you could throw PII in the middle of the street. I'm going to tell you all the reasons why not to do that and why that's a bad idea. But if I feel I've done a good job, I'm not going to lose sleep if you choose to do it anyways. I might not work here soon after because I don't want to deal with the consequences of that, type of thing. But I'm not going to lose any sleep knowing that I, gave you the best information to make that decision, type of thing.
So I think that's huge strategically. Tactically, there's probably a couple other things to be thinking through as well, right? So if you're an organization that hasn't done RIFs in the past, you might want to think about doing a tabletop centered on that. It's the operational cadence of letting a whole bunch of people go at once is totally different than the onesie twosies that happen over time. And so if you don't have those lines of communication with HR, and frankly with legal, with privacy kind of cleared, you might end up stubbing your toe on some things that you don't want to do, right?
Well, and actually, this goes into a good point that some of the stuff, I've gone through this a couple of times, obviously in my career. One of the things I like to do, and I'll even spend my own money on this, is I'll take my team out to lunch and or dinner, drinks, a little bit more frequently. Because when this happens, there's a cultural separation. People are down. People are seeing their friends that are leaving. People are more worked. Now they have to pick up the slack for other people. Not being there and everything like that.
That's a great point. You got to manage the morale after.
Yeah, because the last thing you want to do is spin to hire again or lose more people because. Their buddy that they worked for years got fired, and now they went to another job that's hiring like crazy, and then they bring them over, type of thing.
And that's absolutely true. And even it's not as important as that point, but another side point of that too is, if people are personally, have a personal relationship with you that they'll carry forward beyond, the organization. I've seen people do some pretty silly stuff as they exit an organization, right? Stuff that required incident response and stuff like that. Well, if they know that you're the security guy that's going to have to deal with all that stuff or whatever, frankly, even if they're bummed out or unhappy or whatever, there's a much smaller chance that they do some silly stuff.
Some good operational things that you made me think of these, which we're talking as if a lot of companies have a certain level of maturity. Let's take it down to the companies that don't.
Yeah.
So
They're screwed.
Some of the things, some of the things, well, they could be.
Yeah.
Some of the things that companies may do poorly that they should be aware of. What is your offboarding procedure?
I was going to say the access cuts, absolutely.
You got to make sure that's tight. You need to look and make sure. I mean, I've experienced this. We probably all have. Who has a critical or semi-critical process that's tied to an employee, that's tied to their user account, and it might just happen to be their Gmail account they set it up with.
That employee spun up the SharePoint site that the rest of the company now uses because it was 15 years ago or whatever.
Or even, as you were mentioning, like those core processes that they've been doing. So is there, cross-training on being able to do a process like at least two people can do every single process?
I'm a huge fan of like job rotations or like mini apprenticeships within an organization from department A to department B where you trade tasks and stuff. Like it doesn't happen nearly as commonly as I think it should. It'll actually rattle a little bit into the next topic, but I think that's a really good way of dealing with that.
Well, that's one of my columns in the security management framework is who's the primary and who's the backup resource. And everywhere there's a backup resource and it's blank, make that cell red and then make sure that becomes a risk in your record.
And oftentimes in this process, usually this is where I start thinking about it in hindsight. I'm like, oh man, like who's going to cover this? But if you get kind of the wins kind of coming that, cuts are coming, you know, that's a good time to review that chart and everything.
Yeah. And a couple other quick tactical things. We talked about access before. Also think about access that's not related to your SSO or major identity systems, right? So if you have a SaaS application that someone in the line of business pulled out a purchasing card and bought, right? That's not connected. Okay, do your processes account for that or do they not? If you have administrative accounts in the Active Directory that aren't connected to, their Workday accounts or whatever, are you thinking about that or are you not? Because the automated elements of the process might not hit everything. And if you're doing a bunch of people at once, there might be a bunch of manual effort from the security team associated with that. And if you're not necessarily staffed to handle that, your cuts are either some are going to get missed or they're going to go slower. Another one that is top of mind for me too is like, again, are you super crystal clear on your litigation hold procedures, right? If you're letting a bunch of people go at once and there's some litigation or potential litigation.
Oh, that's a really good point.
That's one. And then also like enhanced monitoring processes. Some organizations want to do, they want to turn the dial up on monitoring of employees if they're at risk or about to leave a little bit. So think about that. And think about that with HR and privacy and all the legal and all the teams.
Yeah, I've been in an organization where in the past, as people were on the list, certain people who were running the data loss prevention system, those people would get put into the system over the month before and just see where data is going. Do they all of a sudden just download a whole lot of things that they normally wouldn't or shouldn't?
All of a sudden, salesperson access the entire CRM type of thing.
Right.
Oh, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Absolutely happens.
Or, forwards a bunch of stuff to a Gmail address,
Yeah. So, and then the very last thing I have on this, it's more of a long tail strategic risk. So we talked a little bit before about like automation or AI, which is, I think, some of the things that might make leadership okay or more okay with, terminating or downsizing or whatever, right? Because I think people say...
What, replacing with AI?
Replacing with technology, right? Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
But the reality is, and you guys know this, but for everyone listening, the reality is AI is really, really good at entry-level stuff. It's not really that great at decision-making capabilities, right? So correlation analysis, awesome, but deciding, not so much.
It lacks the context.
Yeah. So you can go down that road and you can potentially go through processes where you let people go, you replace them with technology, all that stuff. The thing to keep in mind, I think, is a long-term risk is what's your talent pipeline look like? Because your decision makers typically come from people that were doing the analysis years ago, right? And if you cut that all off with technology or the majority of that off with technology, where are your next leaders coming from? And I think that'll probably rattle into our next topic a little bit, but is a long tail risk for downsizing today. You can't, if you're leaning into technology to do that, you really need to be thinking about your talent pipelines.
So do you want to wrap this topic up? What are some takeaways people should be worried about?
Where do we start?
I love the identifying the security functions that can't be sacrificed.
Yep.
And making sure that's crystal clear. and
tied to business objectives,
yep.
right?
Yeah.
and then figuring out what the risks are if you lose them. I liked your idea of actually tabletopping some of this. In some tabletops we've done recently, we've actually, the resource might be in a room, but we say that resource can't answer any questions. They're just unavailable.
Yeah, it's one of the injects or twists. So they're gone.
I always do that on
That's a good one.
Tabletop. Yeah, get core people like unavailable for whatever reason.
Yeah. I think tabletops are good. I think just make sure you have strong relationships, or if you recognize you don't have strong relationships horizontally and vertically in the organization, make some time to build those out.
Yeah.
I think is important.
Yeah, because that's one of the things. I mean, I think we've all seen the studies that when people leave, it's more than not their boss that they're leaving, in that, so if you kind of keep that and the team tight, hopefully they'll minimize further disruptions, to, the organization.
But then I think walking the process and thinking about the little stuff that might go wrong in terms of access cuts or lit hold things or whatever. And then, what was the other? There was one more in there.
Focusing on optimization, so things that don't require necessarily capital expense, into that.
Yeah. But
clean up access control.
Yeah, but it's a huge risk. I mean, a lot of things can go wrong. Oh, it was the security. Thank you for buying time for me. It was the security team. Again, if you're going to release a bunch of employees all at once, make sure you have the ability to actually do that operationally, like that your access team can do that, because some of that will be automated. But most organizations I work with, there's a bunch of manual stuff, and it's totally different if you're doing like 3 people in a week versus like, oh, this is 150 people this week. So you don't want those processes to.
And it's usually not this week. It's usually Thursday or Friday.
Yeah, you're right. It's
get the bobs in,
the specific
all the
days.
stuff.
Right.
Yeah. What would you say you do here?
I'm a people person.
There've been so many memes this week on that. So I've enjoyed it all. But anyways, segue into that. You brought up about talent management, at the end, and making sure you have a good pipeline. We've been hearing forever about the security shortage. Before we kind of dive into some of that, do you actually believe there is a shortage in the cybersecurity industry workforce?
I do.
Okay. Yes.
Yes. I have examples right now. We're trying to help somebody identify a resource that can properly do GRC work
Like mid-level?
at a mid-level engineer level. And it's been months that they've been looking for somebody, more than months, and they get close, but they can't find the right person. And so this ties into.
However, so I also agree with it, with a little caveat.
It's a qualified yes. It's like mine.
How many applicants have you got with that role?
Oh, I think we processed over 100.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not a shortage; it's a shortage of qualified talent. Into that.
Do you have thoughts? So whenever I dissect these systemic problems, I always try to figure out what's the source, what's the root, because it always gives me different ideas on how it might be either long-term solvable or even short-term solvable. So do you have thoughts on why there's that shortage? Because I have a theory, but I want to hear your thoughts on why first.
So I have a couple. So, and I find that, as you go up in the ranks, there's less of a qualification for some of the experienced people with that. Because I've been doing some roles, especially in order to the junior, you get hundreds of applicants.
Tons.
And
so many are global talent pool now, right? To a large extent. With
and I often have remote, allowed into that, usually limited within time frame or time zone, just to make it convenient. But at the same time, you're getting hundreds you're sorting through.
Yeah.
And so you're looking at any type of experience, so even if it is a junior position, if they majored in college for it, if they've had any internship or 1, 2, 3 years in something similar into a role, type of thing. But you'll get tons, that that are just coming out of school, and it stinks, into that. But I'm getting people that have been sort of into the role, whereas people just want to get into the role, without that. So I think we have a problem, and I really wish that this is going way beyond our topic here.
That's all right.
But we need to get more into more of an apprenticeship type thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Type of thing. Like you learn so much on the job. In fact, I remember hiring somebody straight out of Pitt. One of these had a curriculum. He majored in information security.
Yep.
He came in. And I was talking with some of them. We actually ended up hiring him. But one of the things that I like to ask, especially like junior people, is tell me right now what you think the number one threat is from a cybersecurity perspective. Open-ended question, not really a wrong answer. I have labeled questions as wrong answer to that. But he came back, and I forget when this was, but he's like, oh, worms are really big. And this was like mid-20 teens, And I'm like, maybe back in 2006.
Tell me more about that.
He's like, oh, we just learned about it at Pitt. I was like...
That's what they're teaching you now.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a problem in some of the higher ed that they've, put their curriculum together who knows when, because it was popular and it hasn't gotten a major refresh. And we all know, like, if you're not invested in this industry, it changes from year to year on priorities and stuff of that nature. So I think a lot of people, like, when you're asking, like, can you critically think? Like, I almost don't care you're interested in security. Can you critically think through A, B, C to get to the solution of X, Y, and Z?
I completely agree with that.
Type of thing. And if you have interest in it and familiarity, great. That's even bonus points. But I want a critical thinker at the end of the day.
Yeah. There's an Einstein quote I just recently read that's related to that.
Oh, yeah?
And it's...
Are you relating me to Einstein?
I am.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and exactly. And it's that why is, college is not to teach you facts. It's to teach you how to learn.
Think or how to
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I could go into a big thing about this. I'll actually send you guys a video. Maybe I'll even put it into the show notes. There's one, he used to be a principal down in Texas, but he goes over our early education and how way back in the day, it used to be called forensics, where we would actually evaluate problems and come up with solutions, to that problems. And in the early 1900s, like Dewey and a number of other players into it basically got it from a kind of critical thinking to memorization and regurgitation, type of thing. And we've shifted our whole educational system to basically just repeat what I say.
And it's actually not like that globally. There's a couple podcasts I've listened to recently that have hit on the fact that it's like, in other places, what they do is they set up intellectual boxing arenas essentially, right? To teach you how to fight collaboratively, right? So argue about a thing and get to a good place. And that's a completely different skill set than have you memorized these facts.
Yeah. What's the OSI model?
Right.
But that was one of the things. Actually, this guy, that he brought this out, they used to do forensics on like American history. They would have two students, this was in 4th grade. Yeah. They would have two students get together and say, the Boston Tea Party where they threw the tea over into the boat, was that a good thing or a bad thing?
Right.
Now you take pro, now you take con. Because if you actually look at that, you're destroying somebody else's property. That could be a con, into that. And the pro could be like, well, there was an unfair tax, so there had to have been, some type of,
we do that at work sometimes. Yeah. We'll actually say, what do you think about this? Now, let's flip and argue the opposite and see where we come out at.
Well, in some ways, it's like the developer rubber ducky, right? Explain your code to the rubber ducky, then you see your bugs, right? But so yes, there is a shortage. There is a shortage. I think there's a shortage too. Just really my theory on why, right? Mm-hmm. You kind of sort of started in security, but you really started in technology, right?
Yes.
You, I assume, also started in technology and got to security?
Yeah, security wasn't a department at the time.
I also did the same thing. None of us started in security. We all collected skills elsewhere, primarily technology, but then some other adjacent domains along the way.
How can you secure something if you don't know how it works is what I always say.
Right. But we have a bunch of kids in school coming out with security degrees that don't have the adjacent knowledge around, I've been part of the help desk and I had to learn these systems, or, oh yeah, I started as a DB. Like, I actually, the more I think about this, is entry-level security gigs are not necessarily always entry-level career gigs, right? That's my take on why I think there's a cybersecurity shortage.
That's an excellent takeaway for graduates that are out there right now. If you're graduating college and you are looking for a job, maybe it might be better, if you want to be in cybersecurity, to apply for that entry-level cloud position or the entry-level IT position. Learn how this stuff works and migrate into a security role.
Right. I think you need to understand foundational, like how it runs or how you manage it or even how people use it, right? Particularly how people use it, right? How do people use networks and how shouldn't they use networks? Okay, now I can secure networks because I can leverage, some of that experience. So anyway, that's my take on why I think there's this gap between people that can do a whole bunch of stuff in the security realm that maybe grew from somewhere else, and people that are graduating in college and go, oh no, and they can't quite do the security role as posted that might have ridiculous requirements anyway, right? That's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But they're like, oh, like, and people interviewing them was like, oh, I don't know that you can do this job. Yeah, I know you have a degree in it, but like I don't believe you can do it because you can't answer these simple questions. Well, they're simple to me because I grew up doing help desk stuff and all these other things.
Right.
So I think there's just a problem there.
A funny comment is I recently seen a job description that said needs 7 years experience in a technology that's only been out for 2 years.
Yeah, we see this like cloud stuff all the time.
But let me put a little context around this. So one of the quotes I picked up from something was cybersecurity employers can't find experienced workers and new cybersecurity workers can't find their first job. And so it's leading to the metrics are U.S. shortage right now is approximately 450,000 professionals and globally 4.8 million. And so that's, I believe those metrics are probably close. And so I do agree there's a talent shortage, but I really think, and we've been calling it out, unrealistic job expectations are being set. And nobody will ever be able to meet that, so you'll never find the right person. And then when you add to that you can't use a subcontractor; it needs to be a full-time employee. Right. And then when you add to that, we've gone back to the office, and you need to now go on site with all the competing companies that will still let you work remote. It's going to create a huge challenge for somebody to bring in a person of that higher experience.
But I think the worst expectation from a hiring perspective is that they're going to start on day one. And I think this gets back to the thing that you said, like hire a brain, hire a critical thinker. The experience, I mean, it's great if they have adjacent experience and all that stuff. But look, I think a lot of organizations where they fail from a hiring perspective is they're like, oh, we want you to have all the things so you can hit the ground running, right?
Nobody hits the ground running.
Nobody hits the ground running. So don't have them start on day one.
A senior executive,
have them start on day 100. Make your plan. You need a ramp up plan. And honestly, the way, particularly security, the way every organization is, I mean, there's some foundational principles.
Every consultant we bring in,
everyone's different.
3 months of at least just figuring things out before you get assigned to real dedicated work.
Exactly. And so I think these organizations are like, oh, we need a compliance professional or we need a security analyst or whatever it is, but we can't find anyone. It's like, okay, but are you planning on investing 100 days of training to, 3 months, whatever, like right around there, right? To get them to where they need to go.
Yeah, but it's not even that. It's also the searching. That added on to it too. Like, how long are you going to
you'll go 6 months, a year without.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
So imagine just with all that time saying, and like, I hate any time I have to hire somebody. I love it because, I feel like, teams are growing, some resources are growing, but the thought of me going through the hiring process again is just
painful.
Yeah.
Which goes back to what you said in the last conversation, which is you need to keep the pipeline up.
Right.
I have so many different thoughts that are percolating here. One is, why don't we, instead of trying to fill that cybersecurity role from an outside person, why don't we just get somebody who's operating in an IT operational role, bring them over, close the knowledge gaps on security,
right? And this is where I
backfill that.
When I talked about cross training and apprenticeships and all those things, maybe on that list of primary and secondary, maybe your secondary should be in different teams because maybe that's your feeder for some of those processes.
That's a good point. And then tying back to the first conversation, if people are being let go from other companies, build a process to go and recruit the heck out of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you should always, I mean, if you have the budget for it, you should always be recruiting for top talent.
Oh, yeah.
Type of thing. Again, you need to have that open, for...
Yeah, you need the resources to do it. But if you don't, again, if you kind of hit it at the source and you're competing for top talent, then, you'll get a couple. If you're not even playing in those realms, good luck filtering through those resumes.
Right.
And I think I've said this before on one of these podcasts, but I also hate I think the process by which resumes are filtered and all that stuff is just wildly broken. And again, it's why I get back to the hire someone for their ability to think critically, for their ability to assimilate information, for their ability to apply things rapidly and reasonably quickly and correctly. The best security hires I've made in my entire career, neither of them came from a security background. One came from a public service background. She's an incredible GRC person who's doing awesome things now. And the other one was initially a PM, and then he moved into networking, and then I stole him onto the security team. So neither of them were security college grads or anything like that. They had great brains, and you get them where they need to go.
Right.
You just made me think of something. Let's flip it a little bit. If you're looking to get a job, and we've covered, this is like a recurring topic for us. If you're looking to get a job, and I learned in the last year that the way the AI that screens resumes before it gets to you is so broken that if you don't have a certain number of occurrences of a certain topic, like for example, I heard that there was one of the country's leading identity and access management experts out there looking for a role. They came from one of the major companies that sell software to do it. And the resume was so well groomed. And I used to be of the mind of saying, let's make sure your resume looks really good and doesn't have a lot of, keep it short, concise, not a lot of repetition. And I now
built for a
reverse
manager's
that.
eyeballs, right?
Yeah. But now I heard that there was a screening that if identity and access management was not mentioned at least 7 times, the resume wouldn't make its way on to the next person.
Right. It's like SEO, but resume version, right?
So if you're looking to get hired, it's not wrong. Go work with a recruiting company. Ask them this question. Ask them, what do you know about the AI systems that's going to review my resume, and what do I need to improve it so it gets past those filters?
Yeah.
And make sure you're working with somebody who knows how to help you with that.
Well, and if you don't have a recruiter, at least at a minimum have ChatGPT or Bing or something build it for you, right?
I'm not a big fan of recruiters.
Personally.
I don't know. I've had very bad luck with them.
Sure, but you don't have to take the job that they find you, but they have a lot of knowledge on how the hiring processes work.
Because they're incentivized to know how it works.
And you can leverage that to your advantage.
And to be fair, I haven't utilized one in decade plus of time, type of thing. But I remember some of the times that I've been assigned a recruiter between jobs and everything, and I was teaching him on how to get jobs,
I'm not saying you started your own company just because you didn't want to be recruited anymore.
He's like, wow, those are really good tips and everything. And I'm like, who's paid you?
Right.
But I also think
don't pay a recruiter. That's my other thing.
Yeah.
But I also think, and I believe we touched on this before. It can be a numbers game, and understand how to craft your resume to get through the filters and stuff like that. I'm a big fan of skipping the line, right? I think you should go to BSides, meet Joe, right? Talk to Joe, meet Justin, talk to Justin, meet Rick, talk to Rick, and communicate somehow that you have a good brain, right? Or that you're interested in the topic, or whatever that is that sets you apart. What's your superpower, right?
100% on this.
And because I just think, even if you get really good at the algorithm, man,
it's still who you know.
You're chasing that dragon.
It's still who you know.
Yeah, and I would say, even on top of that, if it's in-person relationship, great, best part. If it's not, go to LinkedIn. If you can find out who the hiring manager or close thereof, send them a note.
Yeah.
Type of thing.
Yeah.
Hey, I just applied to this job. I think I'd do really good into it. Please let me know if you have any questions.
And better yet, ask them for a 20-minute call.
Yeah.
Get
or
on
something
and-
like that. Yeah.
And that'll feel weird, right? That if you've not
does.
done that before, it will feel weird. Do it anyway.
But all of a sudden, your name is in their head, onto this. And I almost guarantee you will at least get an interview
I'll tell
out
you,
of that.
the cold calls I respond to are typically the ones where someone has a really tight, kind of clever 1 to 2 minute video that captures my attention. I go, you know what? I just spent 2 minutes watching this person talk to me about whatever, this marketing thing or this tool or whatever. Sure. I'm gonna hit them back and say,
So
yeah,
you're saying applicants should record a 30 to 40
do a
second
little
clip
do a video cover letter.
and send it? Yes.
Why not? Right? I mean, it's what salespeople do to get in front of leaders at organizations. If you're an applicant, you're selling yourself.
Yeah, that's great. So, one of the things to think about, and this is for everybody out there who has trouble hiring, is your organization unintentionally excluding qualified talent by prioritizing experience over potential?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Get rid of, if you are a security leader, I challenge you to go to HR and tell them to get rid of as many filters as possible and actively work with them.
I agree.
To get rid of those
Then
filters.
what if you get 1,000 resumes you have to go through?
Then you figure out a different way to prioritize them.
Yeah. It's so hard.
It's not easy, but look, finding the best again, you're fighting for the best talent.
And I would agree. And I agree with getting rid of some of the filters, with that.
Within
But,
reason. Yeah.
Like I went through and just hired a developer last year,
Yeah.
and I got close to 900, 1,000 applicants.
Mm-hmm.
I was spending seconds per resume.
all.
One thing that threw it off was in the garbage. Like
Yeah.
if they misspelled one thing, in the garbage.
Yeah.
If if it was a messy resume, in the garbage. Like anything to lead me a way of getting this filtered through was in the garbage.
I mean, I almost feel like you end up with better results. Almost don't even post it. Just post it yourself on LinkedIn. Like the people that Justin knows, right? Like, I mean, I did it with you guys today. I said, hey, do you guys know, a DBA developer guy? Like, because we trust each other's judgment and all that stuff. And
that's where referral programs are actually, you know, pretty good into that for the most part.
Yeah. But like a corporate posting, I mean, I don't know. You're almost signing up for spam.
Yeah.
But yes.
I think we, What were we going to say?
No, I was going to say, but were there other tactical tips that you had because you were...
No, that was, basically make sure that migrate people from within, from other roles, get them in there. One of the things that, there's, for anybody in the Pittsburgh area, Pittsburgh Tech Council has this apprentice program, which is made for creating apprenticeship style offers for, for cybersecurity and other IT roles.
Yeah.
And so they're actually helping to solve this problem by getting qualified people. But I'm thinking about it, for this purpose is, you're the hiring person, you're having trouble, root cause analysis that, just figure out what it is, and then see if you can't solve it some other way.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like the concept of like, oh, you're looking for good security people, like poach them from other parts of the org because they already understand.
Yeah,
how
but then
certain things
IT is going to hate you.
Well,
well, then help IT.
Because they have to then go through the hiring process.
IT backfill.
You need to manage those relationships. Well,
Yeah,
that's true too. Yeah, help IT backfill.
Because take all the resumes you're getting that are probably good for that other role,
Right.
and just cycle them over because they're probably right for that.
Yeah,
and
that kid
not
still
right
wants
for
a
you.
job.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot of the, we talking about, when our experience going into cybersecurity was always from other
It
backgrounds.
started in IT.
I remember in high school giving a presentation on how the internet worked, how a packet got from your computer to another computer somewhere else, and all the steps in between, and how routing worked and IP addresses and all that stuff. And everybody was like, wow, this was in the 90s, of course. But I challenge everybody, I do a career class sometimes to my kids.
Yeah.
And one of the things I talk about with cybersecurity is usually there's always a air of curiosity on how things work. That's usually a common thing when you go into any type of cybersecurity. Like, we have lockpick villages. Why do we have lockpick villages? Oh, how does it work? Can I bypass it? Like, it's a curiosity nature of it.
That is absolutely true. And speaking of Lockpick Village,
I was gonna do the same segue.
It's segue time. And speaking of Lockpick Village, and speaking of giving presentations, you know who really has an awesome Lockpick Village, but also needs people to come present? BSides Pittsburgh.
That's true.
BSides Pittsburgh. So this is a quick reminder to everybody out there listening. BSides Pittsburgh is Friday, July 11th, Rivers Casino. And this year we're aiming for our biggest event ever, which is going to be really tough because last year we sold over 1,000 tickets and we need to beat that. Yep. So we got some improvements lined up for this year. Last year we had 2 tracks and we only had 2/3 of the casino space. This year we have the entire casino space for the presentations. So we're looking to end up with 3 tracks of talks ranging from 20 minutes to 50 minutes. So we can get those shorter ones in. We can get the normal, speeches in. We're working on fixing the congestion. Last year we learned a lot of lessons, jammed up hallways. So with
that was the
space,
first year that the new build out with like getting rid of the cafeteria and everything.
Yeah, they took the buffet,
which is
and
beautiful, into that. But obviously,
new space and biggest event ever. There were some crowded channels,
and we went from the full space that we had the year before.
That bad,
but this year we had to put like sponsors on 2 sides of a wall. We figured we can only put them on one side this year, and we have the room to do it.
Yeah, even if you didn't think it was bad, it'll be even better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then the Capture the Flag is moving back. Anybody who went to the Capture the Flag this past year, it was in a new room. This year they're getting back to the old, I think it's called the Ohio room, and it's the one with the windows and the sound, and it's everybody loves it there. And then another thing is that I wanted to point this out. I heard from so many people that we failed to put on the schedule the after party from 5 to 7. So we have an after party from 5 to 7.
I mean, shouldn't you just assume that?
You should, but not everybody did.
Not.
Yeah.
And we didn't put it there. And then for those of you that are daring enough, if you find the right ones of us, there's usually an after party.
That's true.
I want to go back to that bar.
We will.
Okay.
I suspect we will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
come to the after party if you want to know what bar.
Party.
Yeah. And if you are looking for a job and you network with the right people, you never know, right?
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to point out is that if we get enough sponsors again this year, we're going to opt for the best food option again, the best buffet that the casino has. We had that last year. We got so many great comments on that. So a couple of things to point out. The call for papers is open. We need more talk submissions.
Yes.
As of a week ago, we had a good handful, but we want more. Out of those, I think there were only maybe 2 women submitters.
Yeah, very few.
We need more, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. Yeah.
And by the way,
I'm saying I'm a woman, but I was thinking about submitting.
Well, definitely submit and also tell everyone in your network to submit.
And also, I think I told you guys this, but a question to our audience too. I was thinking about doing a lightning talk for starting up a cybersecurity podcast and kind of go over our kind of adventure and equipment and ideas and format and what tools we use with it. I thought that might be an interesting
that would be very
20-minute thing on like, here's how we do, here's what our numbers are, here's how
I was just talking to somebody who
somebody
said,
to cut, all that stuff and everything.
I was just talking to somebody and I got to look at my notes, see who it was. And sorry if you're listening, I don't remember. But they said they want to learn how to do I remember who it is. I'm not going to say it though. They want to learn how to do a podcast.
Yeah.
And they would be very interested in that.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
So, yeah, if you're interested, comment, to us and everything. If we get, a few, I may submit that. I thought it'd be interesting. It's a unique experience. And if anybody's considering it, like I'd give you all the, what to consider pricing because these guys know me, but anytime I'm interested in something means like dozens of hours in front of YouTube.
Yeah.
So before we did this and I proposed, to Rick and Joe that we get together and do this, I've done dozens of hours of research and equipment.
And you can carve all that down to a 20-minute talk.
A 20-minute talk, type of thing.
Well, and so Justin, if you don't mind, let's put the CFP in the show notes.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Will do.
Yeah.
And then everyone listening, if you don't mind blasting that out, it'd be greatly appreciated.
One other thing is we have some women speakers from before. What I'm trying to say is, if you have at all any reservation because this is the first time you want to speak and you're not sure what to do, reach out.
Yes.
We will tie you together
Reach
with
out
a person.
how? Over the CFP?
You can, yeah, just email that, email info@BSidesPittsburgh.com and let us know that you want to.
You're looking to be paired up with a mentor.
You want to be
do a speak.
perfect, yeah. Go to pitsec.com, get into the B-Sides channel, and start chatting with people about it. So, a couple other things. We need more sponsors. There's a ton of great benefits for being a sponsor. I think, and I haven't found anybody to dispute this, we are the largest cybersecurity conference in Pittsburgh, and we none of the money goes to anybody's pocket. It all goes back into the event so that we can take every bit of funding and turn it into the best conference ever. This gets so many awesome people there. So if you're a sponsor who's listening, go to the sponsor page of BSidesPittsburgh.com, apply for sponsorship. Most sponsors who apply get accepted to do this, and they get put in front of so many qualified buyers.
Well, and I'll also say, I walk around each year, and I know, Joe, you make the rounds as well, and the individuals who are at the sponsor tables are generally very, very happy with the event.
Everybody we get rave reviews for that.
Yeah.
One other thing, register now. For the first time ever, we're doing something different with the tickets. We've kept them super cheap. We're probably the cheapest while being the best cybersecurity conference in Pittsburgh. They're $20 a ticket, but we've added an early bird, and it ends on April 14th because, and then the price goes up. And the reason we did that is because we need to buy T-shirts, we need to buy food, we need to make sure we have great counts. And so many, half of our tickets were sold in the last month, and we had to super negotiate with the casino in order to get the food handled. And there was a ton of people who were disappointed they couldn't get a T-shirt, but we already ordered them.
Right. So we want to encourage everyone to order early, right?
Yeah.
And to your point, it's an escalating cost because it just becomes more challenging.
Yeah. So
that's a big expense too. Like, you don't want to order too many T-shirts that you're not dishing out.
Right. Well, we only order for the number of people that we have tickets. So we actually manage that risk by only ordering if you've signed up by the date that we need to get the orders in.
Right.
Which is at least over a month before.
And food too. We have to put in those orders early.
The casino orders that. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting. Separate, I don't want to destroy your thunder. Another B-Sides I just signed up for. It's in April and everything. I just signed up this week. They're already out of T-shirts for they only have smalls left.
Oh, interesting.
I'm like, really? Like, they're like, yeah, we're out of T-shirts.
So they ordered ahead and
I guess so. Yeah.
Anything else? Any other details?
What's that?
Any other details?
Just a reminder, submit a talk.
Yep.
We need sponsors. Go get registered. If you have a sponsor, if you're working with a vendor and you love that vendor and you think they should be there, go tell them. Go tell them about it.
Yeah.
And then some other things that are going on. We have the various villages. We'll have Lockpick Village. We'll have the Wireless Village. We got some surprises coming up that we can't talk about until that. Rick and I know about it because we're the organizing committee. Justin doesn't even know about it.
I don't know about it.
Yep, and we're not telling him.
But it's going to be fun.
So all kinds of good stuff.
Something kinky. That's all I know.
It is not.
No.
One other note that I'll say is if you are under 21 or you have people that are under 21, just be aware there's some extra processes to go through with the casino. So even more important that you register early or register those individuals early so we have all those counts right and all that stuff. So
absolutely,
definitely tell your friends. It's a great time. Attend, learn a bunch of stuff, do a bunch of networking.
Yeah. Hey, cheers to that.
Cheers, man.
By the way, last year we asked the casino to open the bar as early as possible. And they did.
I saw that in the planning notes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to this year, right?
That'll happen every year.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah,
it is a new standard.
Yeah.
And speaking
I don't
of
care about the pass.
Right.
Speaking of having a drink, what are we drinking?
Yeah, Rick.
So we are drinking Lady of the Glen. They are an independent bottler out of Scotland. I recently got to do some work in Scotland. If I got to hang out with you in Scotland, you are awesome. Everyone that I hung out with there was super cool, so shout out to them. I also, where I bought this, Aberdeen whiskey shop, and I met an individual named Brian who was extraordinarily knowledgeable, very generous with his time, and I did not spend nearly as much time as I wanted there.
Or money?
Or, well, yeah, you can only bring home so many bottles. But
You didn't bring a suitcase just for the bottles?
I did not.
No.
I did not. But Brian actually has a history in IT. So we're meeting more and more people that are these kindred spirits of IT and security folks. So anyway, shout out to Brian. Thank you. You're awesome. But we're drinking this Lady of the Glen. So what they do is they go around to various distilleries in Scotland, perhaps some other countries nearby as well. But they'll find a unique or interesting cask, and then they'll do a bottling of that cask. So it's not just Ardmore who produced the spirit for this.
So they'll
but
buy a
others as
barrel
well.
and then put it under their own label and everything.
And they might do some extra finishing. I don't think they always do, but they might sometimes.
Got it.
The rules with Scotch are a bit more broad, I think, in terms of like how you can manipulate the juice. But yeah.
And I thought that was interesting. So it's 10-year-old.
Yep.
It's a higher proof. We were a little bit surprised on first sip.
Got much nicer once I added a couple drips of water.
Yeah, 57.1% alcohol. Yeah. So a little bit on the hotter side and everything. But the finish is it was like
Orso.
Oloroso.
Sherry cask.
Yeah, essentially that's what it is. It's a sherry cask, but I never heard the Oloroso finish. Which actually, you can actually taste that.
Oh, yeah.
I have a harder time with scotches because I'm not used to it, and the peat just hits you. And this is a higher peat,
It definitely is.
Flavor with this. So with such a dominant flavor, to get like some of the subtleties out of a dominant flavor I'm not used to, it's hard to pull out some of those. But
This is the less smoky of the two that I brought back, so you're welcome.
I don't mind like doing this, on an occasion. Yeah. But when I'm trying to pull out notes, it's hard when I'm not used to a peat always being there.
I get a lot of coffee. I do get the coffee.
You get the coffee grounds?
I feel like I do, and then like a bunch of honey.
Yeah, so they said tasting notes is chocolate raisin, coffee grounds, and honey on toast.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and I actually get I taste more of the sherry.
Yeah.
Into that as kind of the finishing note into it. So,
but fun. So this typically doesn't leave Scotland unless you buy it from a website or something like that. So you can't generally get it.
But you bought it for the UK market.
Well, it says for the UK market because they put that on things that are produced in the UK. I don't know how that work. But anyway, Brian was awesome. If you happen to be in Aberdeen, go to the Aberdeen whiskey shop. They have a bunch of stuff. They even had a bottle that I got for another friend of mine that you can only get in that specific whiskey shop, which is pretty cool. But these are very local to the region. So yeah.
We don't have to edit any of this out because of export laws, right? You didn't.
No, I went through customs. This is all good.
It's all good. Okay.
It's all good.
You didn't sneak it in through your luggage. Okay.
I mean, it was not snuck, but it was in my luggage.
Yeah. Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
All
right. Well,
awesome.
thank you, Rick.
Cheers. Thanks for bringing
delicious.
this.
All right.
So, what else?
Well, I'd like to introduce the next topic.
Yeah.
And it's something I keep running into. So, high level. Is your C-suite cyber crisis ready? So, how many of us, and I think we'll all raise our hand, and a number of listeners will too, have gone through your IT and IT security tabletop exercises? So we do that. Yeah. How many times do you go through the exercise and you talk about things in generalities or assumptions of what is going to have to happen at the C-suite level, but you're not quite sure? And what I'm proposing is now is the time to bring your C-suite into your crisis management program and your tabletop exercise. And again, like we said earlier, all risk, all cyber risk is business risk. Let's bring that in and start getting the C-suite involved in your tabletop exercises.
Yeah.
So have you guys gone through and had CEOs and the such be part of your tabletops?
In prior roles, yes.
Yes. And obviously in prior roles, type of thing. I'm actually curious who doesn't do that.
Oh,
And I'm sure there's a number, but
yes.
I can't imagine that taking over a security leadership role right now and not consider that.
Well, I think there are times where sort of executive leadership is uninterested in engaging, either for historic reasons or just because maybe the risk communication dialogue isn't as mature as it should be.
So do you think that executives are...
I usually tend to say, I don't care, you're participating in this anyways, because something's going to happen. I usually say it's not if, it's when.
But you're also equipped to have the mature risk acceptance dialogues. Whereas I think in some organizations, if they haven't been exposed to leaders with that mindset, right, that have either forced the issue or encouraged the issue, they just might not be there.
And you need to be very respectful. Obviously, these meetings get expensive very fast, and if you don't have your ducks in a row, you will get beat up and out the door very quickly.
And you won't get another shot.
However, if it's done right, the consequence of not doing it and the lost revenue that probably will happen when the leadership is not prepared is going to be so much more significant than what those 3 hours equaled.
And any leader worth, I don't care who it is, any leader worth their salt, know this is important to run through and have a generic game plan to go through.
Again, if they've been communicated to appropriately. I've seen a couple of organizations where they're operating under, a false sense of security, or they've had, sort of the bad CISO, perhaps, that has hidden problems in the past. No, I got this. And then, so I think it's very real that there are organizations that have not engaged in that way. And I agree with you, but it can be a journey to get executives that are of one mindset into the next level.
What do you think
mindset.
Executives at the C-suite level are treating cyber incidents with the same urgency as other business crisis issues?
I think they need to be framed as such. So I'm a huge proponent of, and this might be a step too far for some organizations, but I don't even like calling it incident management from a cybersecurity perspective. It's all emergency management, right? In a cybersecurity incident, a business continuity thing, a disaster recovery thing, a PR thing, and from my perspective, I always encourage emergency management.
Yeah, I also hear called crisis management.
Yeah, exactly. And it should be one, in my opinion, it should be one thing with a bunch of different playbooks.
Yes. Oh, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, where you layer it up to the right level of engagement.
Exactly. And because
depending on the issue.
I've seen some early maturity organizations that invent all their silo-specific emergency plans, and then everyone's trying to be like, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Executive, do you know what you do if there is a PR issue? Do you know what you do if there's a legal issue? Do you know what you do if there's that? And it's like, well, why do I have 30 different plans for dealing with a major emergency? There should be a major emergency plan. You get the right experts in the room, and they help walk the processes.
But sometimes that is so huge. Look at a United Healthcare. A months long issue, type of thing. Like, that's not just let's meet for a few hours and figure it out.
Oh no! Like, you need. I mean, again, and there are many. Again, organizations of a certain size have kind of parts of the organization dedicated to business continuity or crisis management or all these things. I think the cybersecurity component of that needs to be integrated into the larger plan.
Don't get me wrong, the couple hours is really performing a tabletop to start uncovering where the disagreements are. And so one of the things but I was
saying, like,
building it out.
No, that's not a couple hours.
No.
That's a lot of collaboration.
Yeah.
So I've experienced where everybody thought the leadership were on the same page with what they're going to do for paying a ransom. Once we got them in a room and started talking about it. So practically, how do you get this done is we've taken your normal tabletop that you might have in IT security for, everybody likes to use the business email compromise that turns into ransomware, right? Mm-hmm. So we start the exercise at the point where IT and security have been working on a problem for about a half a day, and we realize where it's going. And that's where we tell the executives we're starting.
We need to ask.
And we sit there with them and say, here's the situation. We're already up to here. What are we going to do? And I've observed top leaders who they all thought they were on the same page with how they're going to pay a ransom and how much they're going to afford to pay and what they're going to do, starts debating the different opinions. And that became a really quick time to say, look, we don't have a decision here. Let's put this on a to-do list and then move on to the next part. And it was so clear to them. They had clarity like they never had before coming out of the other side of this, that they need to focus on building some better plans and do what I call strategic preparedness. And so we take it from that point, which was a lot what you guys are saying. It's one plan, but then it has its parts and different playbooks.
Yep. Exactly that.
Yeah, that it needs to be a modular, type plan where you can execute these different parts and everything. Because some issues might need a PR, thing. Some might need a legal aspect,
I would say they all need all of that. In fact, I think
maybe the consideration, but not always the execution of it is, I guess, what I'm talking
depends.
about.
If you catch it,
Depends on the issue.
Let's look at it this way. The whole purpose of a good IR plan is it never gets to a certain point. A good IR plan lets you identify a problem before it gets to the point of being a breach. So incidents, you'll have them. A breach, you might have enough preparation to stop the breach from happening because you catch something. When you don't stop it from happening and you are breached and that data is out there and your systems are encrypted, that's where PR is going to be super important because now you have customers that can't have access and somebody's got to get on out and talk about this.
Yeah.
Legal has always
might
been
matter,
involved.
privacy might matter, compliance, contract people,
So what I urge everybody to think about is if your company has already talked about what are we going to do if there was some kind of ethical misconduct. How many companies have had a leader stepped out because of harassment or some kind of executive problem and they decided to resign?
Yep.
We know they're not really resigning. They are asked to leave. And those become major incidents.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they already have plans for that. They already are talking about what they're going to do to get and do the PR work. So for the same purpose, if there's a cyber crisis that makes its way all the way to the point of being so much of an interruption that you need to have your top leaders get out in front, call your best customers, tell them what's going to happen, tell them what your plan is. I mean, how many companies you work with that actually have a separate dark website already set up and prepared so they can turn it on really quick? Because if you're going to start to do that process while you're dealing with the incident, it's too little too late.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I agree. And
there's legal firms that you can actually outsource that all too.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to pay more of a pretty penny, obviously.
And then integration with insurance companies and all these different things, right? So there's all these parties that are internal and external that are potentially in play. But I think anyone who's listening that sort of maintains their own cybersecurity response plan, get that thing. If you have a larger parent, crisis plan or emergency plan that's different for some reason, start having those conversations to get them integrated.
Two things that come to mind. One is, let's talk about the cyber insurance. How many companies lots of companies are getting cyber insurance. How many do you know that are getting on the phone with the cyber insurance carrier and taking advantage of everything they offer? Well, we'll call it for free, but you're already paying for it. But it's free after you made your payment. Not everybody takes advantage of those. Are you seeing?
Well, a lot of it is garbage too. But
in what way?
I've seen some templates of policies that are boilerplate garbage, or some of the stuff might be good, with it. But a lot of the insurance companies are like, here's all the free stuff. Put this BCP plan and just turn it on and you're good, or something like that. And it basically says, call us, or something like that.
But even if it's bad, I think...
And they don't customize it or anything like that. Yeah.
You have to customize.
You still,
no doubt.
You still should engage because, the more you're engaging with your insurance provider, the less recourse they have not to pay you the money because you haven't done the things that they think you should be doing.
And you really need to understand good terms and conditions with what you're signing up for. I think that's some of the most important, and go through it like one of the things I always love to do is go through it like scenario based when you're like really understanding your policy, is saying, you know, what would we get reimbursed for? What are the things that would procure us from being reimbursed?
Oh, I totally love that idea.
You know, type of thing. Like, if we get a BEC and we transfer the money out, do we get still reimbursed for that?
Right.
You know,
Tabletop it.
Exactly.
You know, if we hit the send on the wire, is that counted a part of our policy? Yes or no? You know, type of thing. And make them actually answer serious questions about this. Obviously, nobody wants to have that happen, but there have been several things where the presumption was we bought insurance for this case and we submitted. They're like, no, you sent that money out yourself.
And your agent should be able to answer those questions in the way that you frame them. And that's the important part.
Even beyond the agent, a lot of the larger companies, and I'm actually talking about your multi-billion-dollar companies that get the cyber insurance that costs several $100,000 premium a year. You're working with some of the best cyber insurance people out there.
Oh, yeah.
Those companies, they actually have dedicated people who are actually waiting to work with you. And the number of companies I talk to that are either say they're planning to do it and haven't done it yet, or just didn't even realize it was an option, is astonishing to me. And so when you call them, there's several things you want to look for. One is you want to take a look at the panel. And if you don't know what a panel is, it's the pre-approved vendors that the agency, the insurance company says you can use. And what you do not want to do on 0 day is call them up and say, I have an incident, and they say, which one of the people from the panel or companies from the panel do you want to use?
Oh, my retainer's with someone else.
I don't know.
Or
I don't know.
Yeah.
And so look at the panel, figure out, is it, which one of the IR vendors, I don't want to mention names, are the ones on the panel. Call 3 of them up. Make this a project to select one, negotiate the terms, get it down, figure out who you're talking to, and actually involve them in your next tabletop.
Well, I'll also say, though...
and also see if you go with another vendor, whether that's covered or not.
That's another topic.
That's what I was just going to say, though. If you already are engaged with an IR provider or have a retainer with someone, oftentimes it is within the agent's jurisdiction to get people added and removed to that list from your policy. So if you're already engaged with someone, you're not necessarily completely required to move to someone else on the list.
100%. In fact, I have a customer. I was on their executive steering committee for their cybersecurity program that had the CFO, other VPs on it. And what I learned is that they did a really good job. They got their cyber insurance. They had their own attorney, their external counsel. They got them added. And so it is not impossible. You'll get pushback at first. You have to work the system to get them in, but you can totally get them in.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you have existing relations, but it's critically important to get all that figured out in advance, to your point. You don't want to be using someone that's on a non-approved list or whatever when you're in the middle of the issue.
Right.
Yeah, the last thing you want to discuss while you're in the middle of an incident, whether it's going to be covered or not.
Well, and it gets even messier, though, because if you have your own forensic experts come in mucking about with stuff and they're not on the list, well, now there's this potential divide between what was allowed to happen, who was allowed to work on this, and the people that did work on it. And it's just a lot to untangle in terms of trying to recover the costs.
And I've heard horror stories where they've actually brought in multiple forensics, like they didn't do the initial forensics, with the pre-approved. Then they had to bring in the pre-approved, pay the money for the exact same thing.
Yeah, and that's another thing that you can do sometimes, too, is if there are people on the list and if your agent doesn't, or whoever, the insurance company doesn't let you switch to someone you want to use, well, you can set up situations, too, where you're like, okay, well, I'm going to have this external incident commander, but they're going to work with your approved firms. Right, but again, you have to get all that coordinated in advance, or else it's not going to work.
That happens all the time. We do that sometimes.
Yeah.
There are actually, I heard this story, and it seemed really good. There's again, I'm not going to name companies, but there's an excellent managed service provider that also does MSSP work in Pittsburgh, and they have gone to the point to their incident response process is so good that once they explain it to the company, they're brought in. So the point from that is, don't don't take no
Right.
as your final answer from your cyber insurance provider
Mm-hmm.
until you had the conversation and really said, look at what they're doing
Yeah.
and tell me if this is not meeting your standards,
Right.
and try to get it covered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, and but this is all pre stuff, again, going through,
Well, it's part of the planning.
plan.
And again, in your cyber incident insurance, again, I think it's all part of crisis management, right?
Right.
absolutely.
What
100%.
is how different is it than insurances of other types, right? Your PR type insurances, your other business interruption insurance, those types of things. And when you're taught, to your point earlier, when you're asking about, oh, would this be covered or would that be covered, right? Throw some blended issues at them, right? Yeah, it's a cyber thing, but it caused a business interruption issue or whatever. How would that work? What are our limits? How would that flow?
Right. So what we're seeing in practice is companies, they run tabletop exercises, but I see the C-suite is not involved enough. So that's one of the things we're seeing.
One thing I just want to add, we really haven't, I mean, we touched on a number of the modules and practicing it and insurance and all that stuff. I mean, one of the biggest things running through either incident response, crisis management, it's just settling on what your communication strategy is and the iteration thereof. Like a lot of people just assume email and or Teams is going to be like there, but it's not agreed upon.
Don't guarantee. It's not guaranteed.
If you're dealing with an active incident where your entire business is not collecting revenue, like it's the bridge is open 100%, and there's people leaving, coming back with more information, leaving, coming back. Like,
Well, let me throw a twist into there.
Yeah.
I was on, so let's go with the assumption that what was actually compromised is you have no communication. Your email infrastructure is down.
Right.
Your Teams is down. Zoom is down for you. None of these things you typically use is up. I was on 2 different calls this week with 2
back
different
to the phone
providers.
bridge, typing in the code.
It almost, except
in the day.
these companies now are creating these crisis management emergency communication systems, but they're actually evolving it much more than. So we had a really good one when I had to deal with 100,000 students at 100 locations across the country. We had one, and it had great functionality.
Yeah, third party app type thing.
Yeah. And it's all able to be done separately.
Yep.
You put in all the information. I'm amazed by the abundance of features that they're building into these now.
Yeah.
So you need to really look at them because you can store your BCP plan out there, all your crisis plans out there on their system.
I do like those vendors.
They have the ability to do things like polling. They can just send a note to everybody. You can just hit one, like, I'm still alive. I got the message.
Yep.
And it's just it's phenomenal how much features there are.
We had that when I was at BNY Mellon, just from an employee thing. And you know what? It's great, like, not being just even being pulled on a crisis management team, but what if we get hit with 6 feet of snow? Like, hey, the Pittsburgh office is closed.
I was going to say the exact same thing.
One for acknowledgement.
It's actually really good to find way if you can employ a system like that. It's great to find ways to utilize them more frequently. Okay, it's not a super crisis, but look, it's a snow day from like a work from home perspective. Even though people would come in, exercise it, right?
Yeah.
It's useful to use because then you'll find, oh wait,
muscle memory.
Well, that and also like if there's the interns aren't in the system. Right, they occupy a different thing in HR. Oh no one told the intern, and then you're like, oh well, that stinks. But now it's solved if there's a real big emergency.
But last thing you want is that not to work during an active shooter situation.
Right, exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah, so I like a lot of the tools, but even like that's one of the core components of any good crisis management is thinking about communication, iteration, and how you're gonna, make active decisions, during that time. And I mean, if you've never been in it, it is hell. People are stressed out, usually lack of sleep if it's going on day 2, 3, 4. It is not fun. It is high stress, and everybody's looking for answers that there's oftentimes none yet, type of thing. So you need a good way to triage that stuff or backtable it, quickly. And, there's things that you just can't answer immediately. You're like, I'm going to have to send an engineer out to get that answer. Like, how many records were, compromised? Can we still do this function? I don't know. Let me go see, type of thing.
So what takeaways do you have?
So, I mean, I just keep coming back to if there's a larger, broader, executive level crisis plan already, make sure that your IT security plans are fully integrated. Ideally, components of that bigger thing.
I agree.
Right?
That's really good.
I think we all agreed it should be essentially one big unified plan tiered out to the level of, you
you have
attention
playbooks.
you need it to
You have
modularize, into that. Like, you mentioned it, like you call it incident response plan or whatever term, it's just dealing with an emergency or crisis,
In fact, sit down with the leadership and say, here's the gap. What do you want to call it? Because we'll all call it whatever the top leader wants to call it.
We already talked
if we
about.
Can get buy-in.
Yeah. And I think that's a key. And we circled around this a little bit earlier too. Like if your leadership's not engaged, right, you need to start having those conversations to figure out why are they not engaged? Is it a problem of understanding the actual risks and outcomes? Is it a problem of them not knowing, well, what would I do here? Wouldn't like the security senior manager just deal with all that? Like where are the issues of why they don't think they need to be engaged? And again, I think tying it to a broader plan can
just point
be
to
useful.
we've had several incidents where it's organizational wide, type of thing. And like just, like last year, United Healthcare, huge, type of thing.
Yeah.
Like somebody's saying, can't just the cybersecurity manager deal with that? Like, no, like that's not a cybersecurity manager,
Yeah.
type of thing,
I mean, I agree with you, but you have to have those conversations.
Right. Type of thing. And obviously, we never want these incidents to happen. Mm-hmm. But the better you practice this, the more, and Joe, you mentioned this point, you're going to minimize the impact to it. Yeah. If you catch it early and often and have a well-exercised plan, you're going to minimize it. You're going to triage it quickly and hopefully come out with a minimum impact with, the least damage to the business.
If you're a multiple hundreds of millions to $1 billion of a revenue company and you're having an incident and every company has the biggest client, there's going to be the biggest one everywhere.
Yep.
Who are the top 5 biggest and who's calling them? Is hopefully the CEO is going to make the call to the top 5 biggest customers, their clients, and explain the situation and give them confidence that something's going to happen.
Right.
And if you haven't talked about that, do you think it's going to happen as flawlessly as it could? It will not.
Absolutely right. Yeah. Well, and just the coordination, like when you're really dealing with big stuff like that, like the legal coordination, compliance coordination, all that stuff, like you really do want to make sure that you have all the important heads of state thinking about this in advance so that the plan is not going to go out of bounds.
Clock starts a lot of it. Like a lot are settling into 3 days. You need to notify some of these, legal, like the
SEC stuff?
SEC, AGs of certain states, just whatever it is, New York DFS, 3 days, like from when you know it's an incident to when you notify us, you got 3 days, type of thing. So you don't want to think about that, like while you're in the middle of still triaging the incident. You're like, who do we need to contact? Type of thing.
You should have a list documented.
Yep, and that should be on legal side to do that. Like they most likely will have nothing to do with containing and triaging.
But even the coordination, like with the NYDFS stuff, as a for instance, like they have an electronic form they need to fill out with very specific information. So like, how do they get that from IT? How do they make sure it's correct? How do they, all that stuff is, again, when you put people in the situation with the tabletop, if it's not in place, you recognize pretty quickly it's not in place as long as you're running it through the process.
Right.
How many companies do you think during their tabletop is actually going to the DFS website,
going to the site,
getting the form and saying, do we know how to fill this out? Yeah. That's a takeaway for me today.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, and because there's some fields on there where you're like, well, the lawyer got, run some of these exercises recently. Lawyer got that, lawyer got that, lawyer got that. Wait. Lawyer needs that,
Yeah.
by
How would they
submission.
know?
How are they going to get it? Oh,
Right.
IT is going to need X amount of lead time to pull that and understand that. Wait, so then we need to start the query or the process at this point in time to make sure the lawyer has the data by this. Like, it's just the, plan forward and backward type thing.
I love it.
So, yeah, there's a lot of different stuff. One thing I wanted to ask you guys to kind of finalize this topic here. What do you think, and this is generically speaking, the right amount of time to pull in the C-suite for this crisis management? How many times a year? How long do you think?
Realistically, so I'll tell you what I wish would happen, and then I'll tell you what's going to happen. So I wish you were at least getting twice a year,
Yeah.
but damn it, I really hope you can get that 1 year time. And when you do, it needs to be so valuable that they see
Yeah.
why it makes sense for them to prioritize this stuff. And if you're not tying it to business risk, not tying it to potential overall corporate funding revenue loss, once you do that, they're going to see the value in it and they're going to understand it.
Right.
I think that's right. I'll just bring it back again. I think part of the value of like fully integrating into business layer crisis plans or emergency plans is that those things are going to be exercised for different reasons. And if you can attach an IT inject, right, or a cybersecurity inject to the PR crisis or to these other things that are occurring, you might be able to get a couple additional reps, right? Because if legal has one or like ethics has one a year and IT kind of gets a DR thing every year and whatever, you can probably find ways to at least exercise elements of this as part of other people's full-on plan exercises.
I can't remember if I said this earlier today in this conversation because it came up 3 times today. But when I was at the Department of Homeland Security CISA session this morning, somebody made a great comment, and it's that even on the physical security side, everything is cyber.
Yes.
So you can go back to the fact that everything is IT and cybersecurity in every one of those examples you gave.
They're the tools that underpin everything. And so, yeah, if you have a financial crisis, you have a vendor crisis, you have whatever, you can figure out, again, as long as you're integrated appropriately, I think you can figure out ways to get additional reps on the cybersecurity side if you're locked in that way.
Yeah. I would agree with you. 2 to 3 hours a year, twice a year. Ideally.
If you can get it.
If you can get it.
So how do you position it so that they are asking for it?
They are asking for it?
Is that possible?
It would take, usually, where's my book on nudging? It's, type of thing.
Yeah.
That takes usually a while for slipping education and, bringing up other people's missteps, or even successes, I've mentioned United a few times, because that was such a massive incident that lasted so long, type of thing. And obviously they didn't do a lot of things, great, into that, but they did their response fairly good, like they didn't drop the ball after the incident, I think they did a lot of coordination, they did a lot of calls, they did a lot of reach out, and it the way they did it wasn't at spare the moment. Like you could tell they at least had some of the stuff and pillars in place, into it. If you can point like some of those successes out, and again, you can't force people to take it seriously, but if they say like, if you give them the case and like that's one of the things I think a lot of security, especially new leadership, your job there isn't to prevent, it's to minimize incidents, and I always say like there's going to be an incident at some point.
Yeah.
Type of thing. Like if we prepare planning for an incident, we're going to be better off, into that. And, as we get senior leadership into that, when it goes up to that level, like if I can handle it at my level, great, I'm going to do it and just let them know, hey, this happened, type of thing. But that's not always the case, if it's impacting revenue and customers and and legal and
Yeah, other
regulatory
people need
stuff.
to know about that.
Yeah, like this is going beyond my pay grade. This is a multi-department company response, and we need to be all on the same page.
Yeah.
Into this.
Perfect.
Like how you get them to ask for it, I think it's going to be hyper dependent on the state of the business, the personalities of the executive team, the politics at play at any given moment. I think the real way to do it, and it's a generic answer, but you really need to understand what's important to them. And to your point before, everything is cybersecurity tools at the end of the day, right? So figure out what's important to them, figure out what risks they're worried about, or figure out what message they want to deliver to the board or to the market or whatever, and frame your exercise is a way that they're preparing to hedge against certain risks or
Right.
dealing with political situations or whatever.
Every risk is a business risk.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the real way to get them to ask for it is to make sure that you're well in tune with what's important to them in the moment, like them being executive leadership team, and making sure that they understand that you can provide a tangible benefit or a tangible path forward in a way that is going to help them outside of just the cybersecurity thing, right? Help them with the problem they're concerned about, even if it's not the cybersecurity problem that you're concerned about.
Right. Business continuity. You want to see the business continue. Rewind this video back to the part where I talked about how do you bring the executives to the point of wanting to make sure that they understand how they're going to communicate to their customers what's going on. And if you can get all of this process down, so my takeaway is plan out your next tabletop, figure out what went well in your last cybersecurity tabletop, pick a point in that where you say, now is the time we need to bring leadership in and convince them to join the meeting. And then when they go through the exercise and you properly run them through the steps, and if you need help, call one of the three of us. We know how to do this.
Not me.
All right, call the two of us. We know how to do this. I got people who know how to do it. And we will walk you through how to engage that executive in a way that gets them thinking about what they haven't thought about before. And what I've seen happen is that you're no more than just a month or two past that exercise, and the CISO starts getting questions.
Oh, yeah.
When are we doing the next step on that crisis stuff we talked about?
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, you are now in a winning position because you now have leadership wanting it. What happens when leadership wants it? They find the budget.
Oh, yeah.
They help you get things done. You tell them what you need to solve the problem that they recognize.
That's exactly
and
it.
you will be in a successful position as a business leader. Cybersecurity risks are business risks. Cybersecurity leaders are business leaders.
Absolutely right.
Let's figure that out.
Yeah. And I would just add one thing to that for consideration is partner up with another department. If it makes sense to do so on these crisis things, right? Make it a nested, multi-layered thing, right?
Well, it has to be, doesn't it?
Well, often it is, but it'll be executed, it'll be driven by, say, a cybersecurity team, right? Allow it to be the ethics complaint, but you're partnering from a cybersecurity perspective with the ethics team to run the executive,
don't make
program.
it a BEC compromise that started it. Start it with something else.
Right.
That's interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
So what else we want to do today?
I think we're pretty much at time here. So I think this has been a good episode.
This is great.
We talked about a lot
of awesome
of
conversation.
Yeah, a lot of
Cheers,
good
guys.
conversations here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for episode 10. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, especially on some of the questions we had today. Please feel free to chime in, and we will see you next episode. Thank you all. Bye.